Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third webinar that we are hosting in collaboration with Digital Surge. And tonight we're going to be talking about crypto scams and how to stay safe online. In general, there's lots of different things that we can do to stay safe online that are not just related to crypto scams, but we will be specifically talking about how to use this to help you protect yourself while you're online, particularly within the Web3 in the crypto ecosystem. I'm going to be taking you through part one, which we kind of list as the educational session. And I'll be going through some examples of crypto scams and then also some ways to how you can keep yourself safe online. Part two, we'll be bringing in Johnny from Digital Surge for a fireside chat where we will be talking about what they do from an exchange perspective to try to help, prevent scam projects from, being listed on platforms and what they do to help their customers stay safe online. So we'll be jumping into that, and there'll be an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So, quick disclaimer before we jump into today's presentation. Educational purposes only. This information, we are not recommending that you, invest in cryptocurrency in any way, shape, or form. Really only use this information for your own research, specifically with staying on how to stay safe online. That's just in general, especially now with AI. The digital scams that are happening are very rampant at the moment. Always make sure that you go and back up and do your own research. Don't take anything at face value of what I said or what GBT. Make sure that you get information from multiple sources and do your own research. And all of our content is recorded and then we share it in our education hub. For those of you that I have not met yet before, my name is Danielle Marie. I am the founder of Evolve Her, which is an education and mentorship platform. And then All Things Blockchain, which is a nonprofit association that's been running for over 5 years that runs educational networking events, primarily based in Australia, but have hosted events globally. And I've been an educator in crypto and blockchain for over 5+ years. The next webinar that we will be hosting will be on May 13th. So join us for that. We'll be diving in and talking about smart contracts and native token services. So I will be going over the first part where I'll be giving you an overview of the lingo and the terminology that's important to know. And then we are bringing in an expert on the topic from Nexa, David, to take us dive deeper down that topic. As I mentioned earlier, we do share all of the recordings in our education hub. And we also are in the process of building out some more of these courses as short courses to provide more free education to yourselves and then people that you recommend. It will always be free, and it's just a place for people to go and get information and a safe place to be able to ask questions. We've also recently working on having an online community where the goal is that we share information, upcoming events, and links to things, but also for the community to get active in a place for you to be able to connect with each other. So please use that as a platform if you're not already in there. It does take a while to get an online community going, so it's something that we're actively working on. For all of the people that are on this call that are from Australia, so I know that we have a very global audience. So just for my Australian friends, because Digital Surge is a local Australian exchange, you do have to be Australian to be able to qualify to do KYC. But if you are based in Australia or you know somebody based in Australia, we've partnered with them. They can sign up using our link and they get $20 credited free into their account. So it's always a great way to get started comfortably. Some of the things that we're going to go over or we have in the past, like in last month's webinar when we talked about dollar cost averaging, it's a great way to get started. But that is only for our Australian friends. But don't worry, tonight's lesson is, can be applied to anybody. So we're going to start with the kind of top mistakes that beginners make, and scams definitely fall into some of those, what I call the top five mistakes that most beginners make. So number one, generally they invest way more than they can actually afford to lose. You always hear of that sob story of the person that took out a mortgage on their home and refinanced their loan and lost everything. And that's because they just invested way, way too much. And you should never, if you can't afford to lose it, you really shouldn't be investing it. Sometimes they get fear of missing out. I've definitely been a victim of this. Everyone's talking about the token. You're afraid if you don't invest, you might miss out. So that becomes a big one. So often leads to you investing more than you really should because you're just afraid that you're going to miss out. And they often don't do their research before they invest. They just do it because an influencer or their friend or their neighbor or somebody that they trusted has told them about it, and they just went and did it and they invested it. The next is scams, because there are a lot of them just online in general. But when we're looking at it, particularly through the lens of cryptocurrency, they prey on people that are always looking for this get rich quick or guaranteed returns or sob stories because they find that people that are have a bit easier victims, right? And so a lot of the times these scams will be focused on trying to get you to lock up your investment for a certain period of time for a certain amount of gains that are guaranteed. So my general rule of thumb, I say to people, like anytime you hear like guaranteed, return on investment and they give you like a high yield and they're guaranteeing that, it's usually a red flag. Okay. And then the other red flag is how much they're making you lock up your investment for. Now, I do want to say there is a caveat to that because if it is a staking protocol and it's a legitimate staking protocol, some of them have lockup periods of like 24, 48 hours, maybe like 2 weeks, 2 months. So it really kind of depends. And some of them, the longer you lock them up, the more yield that you get. So it's not necessarily a one size kind of all fits all. But in general, if it's a platform, it's not a protocol. Like it's somebody trying to sell you mining services or like fractional mining services. And they're trying to get you to lock up, $100,000 for like 6 to 12 months, that would definitely be a huge red flag. If they were guaranteeing any type of returns, that would be a huge red flag. Um, the couple of like old school use cases, if you wanted to go and do a little bit of research and homework, BitConnect and USI Tech were some of the two popular scam platforms in the past that were offering this type of lock up your investments and then you'll get a certain amount of return. And it was really kind of this Ponzi scheme. But you can go down that rabbit hole if you want to take a look. But the one thing I really just like to always hammer home is that there are scammers in every industry. Okay. It's not just crypto, especially now with AI, online dating. It's everywhere, right? But this particular session, we are going to focus particularly on the crypto industry. So first, let's talk about some just general scams, and then we'll talk about crypto scams specifically. So the most probably common one, and I'm sure a majority of you have heard of phishing emails. And actually, just out of curiosity in the chat, I want to see here. Has anybody ever fell for a phishing email scam, like clicked on the wrong thing in an email before? Just a yes in the chat or a no, just out of curiosity. Has anybody ever had one or been a victim of one? Or maybe you got a phishing email, but you didn't you caught it. You didn't actually become a victim. Almost. We've got one almost. Thank you, Daryl. All right. Social engineering. This is the probably a combination. Social engineering and phishing is very, very common. But they use their social media platforms to learn who you are. So that's why you've got to be careful with the amount of information that you put out on these social platforms and that's made available for you, because they'll try to use that email, that information to try to target you with phishing emails and then also data breaches, which we'll talk about shortly. Deep fake and AI scams, which are still relatively new for some people. If you've been pretty proactive in the AI space and GPT and Claude and playing with these different LLM platforms like Gemini and DeepSeek and Grok and all of that, then you're probably aware of what deep fakes and these different AI scams are. If you haven't been playing in that space, then it's very important that you understand the vulnerabilities that and how easy it is for these scammers to impersonate people and copy their identity, which is also not that we're going to go down that rabbit hole today, but why I think that the technology of cryptography and blockchain technology can help us find some solutions to just having a human identity and for one person to avoid these different types of scams. So you'll see them in all types of shapes and sizes. If you were to zoom in on these scams here, you'll see that one of them actually looks like very legitimate. It looks like a support at Kraken.com. Kraken is a very well-known exchange. Like this, by looking at this at a glance, I was like, oh, wow, like, look at that email. It looks legit. But I knew that it was a phishing email because I don't have an account with Kraken, even though we work with Kraken and I think that they're amazing. But even at the time I got this, which was a while ago, I just did, I already have so many exchange accounts. And so I knew that there was no way that this was legitimate. So I shared it with their compliance team. But the scammers can fake where the email, like, that it's come from that email, even though it hasn't. So it's very, very important that you don't, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this, but even if when the email, like domain looks like it could be real, like in this one, like you see, it's like support at kraken.com. You're like, oh, that looks legit. Never click the links that are inside the email. Always go to the platform and log in that way. And it will make sense in a moment, because we've got some more examples that we're going to go through. So now let's talk about some of the top crypto scams that you may have heard of before, or kind of common terminologies as a pump and dump. So a pump and dump is where it's like kind of strategically planned that these investors are just going to throw a whole bunch of money at it. They're going to get a whole bunch of KOLs to promote it and market it. But there is actually no long-term plan. The developers and the project kind of founders generally will pump it, and then they'll take out all of their tokens and their liquidity and just dump on it. And then the people that came in and invested afterwards lose all their money. So, very, very quite common and popular, definitely back in, the 2017, 2018, and then again in like the 21, 2021. Fake ICOs and token sales. So back in 2017, 2018 was like when the craze or the trend of ICOs took off, which stands for initial coin offerings. And so a lot of these were a combination of not even legitimate projects, right? Like they were just trying to raise money. And we're not going to dive too deep into ICOs, but essentially ICOs are a way to for projects like to raise funds to build out whatever they're saying that they're building out, right? So what problem, what product, tool, or service are they building to solve what problem? And it was a way of people basically raising funds. And then so sometimes the projects were just scam, pump and dump projects. And then sometimes they were legitimate ICOs, platforms, that are actually genuinely trying to build applications and solve real world use cases. But then they would have, fake wallets, like fake ICOs. So people would think that they would be buying the legitimate token, but they'd actually be buying a fake token. So these were quite popular back in 2017, 2018, and kind of more of the earlier days. I don't hear of it as much, but I'm not saying that it doesn't happen as much, but definitely something that you want to be made aware of. Cloud mining contracts. These tend to still be quite popular, and you want to be very, very careful when you're looking at any type of platform where you're giving them a, like fiat currency to mine some particular token, whatever it could be. It could be Bitcoin, it could be another type of crypto. And you just have to be very wary of um, the legitimacy of the project, the health of it, how long are your funds locked up for? Can you withdraw them? Because essentially, if that business goes out of business, then you lose all your money, right? So it's very important to know the health of that business. And so mining can be a very difficult business to crack. So if you're giving people money for fractionalizing mining contracts, not that that concept doesn't work, right? It does. It's essentially a whole bunch of people chipping in. It's expensive hardware and everything, so a whole bunch of people chip in for the hardware and basically share the cost of running this mining node, and then you share the tokens that are minted from that. Okay, yeah, great, but then it's, do you trust the company that is offering that product or service, and how safe are your funds? So be very careful, because that's another one that is a landmine that is full of different types of scammers. Honeypot smart contracts. So in DeFi, in the recent years, smart contracts and bad code or malicious code, and not that I'm an expert, because I'm not from the technical side of things, but it has definitely been a problem for DeFi applications, and where there's funds sitting in these smart contracts and they get drained. There's been other different types of sophisticated hacks happening now in the DeFi space that aren't necessarily from smart contract vulnerabilities, but they're definitely one that you have to watch out for. And which is also why it's important when you're doing your research for your different projects that you check if they've had their smart contracts audited. If they have, who audited them? Do they have this information available on their website? How often are they getting their smart contracts audited? Because it depends on how often they're updating things on their platform or their application. So there's lots of different things that you have to take into consideration. But also, oops, I just went the wrong way. Something that you have to be aware of. Malicious wallet extensions. So you hear a lot, quite often. I'm not 100% sure how it happens to people, but you'll hear the term, my wallet got drained. They will connect their MetaMask or their Phantom wallet or their Trust wallet. It can be any. The picture's just MetaMask here, which is one of the longest, kind of oldest, standing wallet extensions. But you can, if you are clicking things and interacting with the DeFi space or connect to a scammer's malicious wallet, then your wallets can get drained. So I always say to people, when you're new into this space, it's important that if when you do start playing with DeFi protocols and wallets and interacting and doing all of that, don't do it with large sums of money. One, because you might lose it. Two, what happens if you are connecting with malicious bad actors in the space. If you don't have large sums in that wallet, then they can't get access to a large sums, right? Airdrops and giveaway phishing. This was definitely very kind of popular when airdrop farming was definitely the trend. Now, it still happens. If you don't know what airdrop farming is, air, we won't dive too deep into it, but different platforms, have different incentive mechanisms to get you to interact with their platform and rolling out. And a lot of the times they will reward their early users, people that come onto the platform earlier and give them feedback and interact with tokens. And so those are considered an airdrop. So they'll take a snapshot and say, okay, anybody, that interacted with this protocol, between this date and this date, they'll get, and it can vary and it can be based off of your time and how much you've interacted. And airdrops became very, very famous for a while for projects to try to get people to buy into the hype. But with that then came with these different types of airdrop and giving a giveaway phishing kind of scams where they were trying to tell people that, like, you've got to put some lock up some liquidity, into this smart contract in order to be eligible for the airdrop. But then they didn't really need to do that. It was just a phishing, scam. So just be aware of those. Rug pull NFTs. Rug pulls aren't specific just to NFTs, but I think a lot of people kind of, that's when they learned about rug pulls and NFTs was kind of through that whole DeFi kind of craze, and where there was all these promises that the were going to be things were going to be delivered to the communities, if they purchased these NFTs, and then nothing happened. They bought their exclusive membership NFTs, but then just no value was ever kind of like attached to those. So these are all different types of scams throughout the crypto industry. So you've got to be very, very careful out there and definitely take your time to learn about them, and always tread carefully when you are playing in this space. So, tips to protect yourself, just don't click links. If you're ever unsure, like I said previously, and I'll say again, is if you get an email and it looks legit, whether it's from your bank, your crypto exchange, your phone company, and you're just not sure, and they're trying to get you to click links for something, just go and log into the account and find out that way. They're actually, starting a lot of like banks and things like that won't actually put things links anymore, because they're just trying to avoid the scammers being able to get people that way. Always double, triple check the URLs. They are getting very, very savvy at disguising them. But as I mentioned, I would just, not even bother checking the URL or the links in the email that they've sent. And I would just be like, you know what, I'm just going to go log in via the main platform. Always make sure that you do your own research and avoid those guaranteed returns, because generally anyone that's guaranteeing returns, um, I'm not saying it's a scam, but just be very wary of it. The third mistake that beginners make is they don't back up their wallets. We went through this in a previous lesson, so we're not going to dive too deep into it today. But when you start playing in the DeFi space or having your cold storage wallet, you really do need to make sure that you are backing up with your wallet, because not your keys, not your crypto. If you don't know what private keys are, or what a hardware wallet is, or any of this, what I'm saying to you, not a problem. Go back, watch the previous webinars in the Education Hub, and get up to speed. Last one is leaving large sums on centralized exchanges. We use centralized exchanges, and we trust them, like we have to use trusted exchanges like Digital Surge to custody assets on our behalf. But we also don't need to leave large amounts of sums. Like I wouldn't, if I am investing long term, like I'm not going to leave like 5 Bitcoins sitting on any centralized exchange. I'm going to have that sitting in cold storage. So the person who actually owns the private keys is that true owner of the crypto. So if I am trusting any exchange, or if I have 5 Bitcoin on my Digital Surge exchange, I'm literally trusting them to self-custody it, and they have the private key. So at the end of the day, they actually have the private keys to that crypto. So if anything happens to any exchange, if they get hacked or they get shut down, you're at the risk or the impact of losing your crypto. There's obviously the cons to also managing your own private keys. There's that responsibility. So there's pros and cons to each. We're not going to dive deep into that today because we've covered that in a previous lesson. But the fifth mistake that they make is not using 2FA. It's become a lot more popular now, but so important to be using 2FA. And the different types of 2FA are important, and we're going to unpack that as we wrap up through this second half here of online security. So we've identified kind of the top common scams. We've identified the top crypto scams. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper in just kind of general practices on how hackers are attacking and getting into and hacking people. This could be through malware, spyware, keyloggers, phishing emails, very, very popular. We've talked about this one. Phishing SMS, these are very, very popular. Phone calls, insecure networks, SIM swapping, even though it's not as popular as it was once before, it is still a thing. And if you don't know what it is, it's important to know, because if somebody can manage to SIM swap you, basically it's game over, because they can pretty much get access to everything if everything is attached to your phone number. And then social engineering. So, social engineering, phishing emails, and SIM swapping are very deadly if they can manage to get to know everything about you and SIM swap you. You're pretty SOL. So, number one, strong passwords. I think this has been being hammered home to a lot of people. A lot of people are using password managers, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. There's different types of password managers that you can use. I've got some that we'll recommend shortly. I currently use Keeper. You have to remember this one master long password, and then it manages these complex passwords for you. If you are not using a password manager already, I highly suggest that you look into that. I would not be storing your passwords in Google or saving them in other different types of platforms on your, desktop or your keyboards or anything of that nature, or in your browsers or anything. So some of the more popular ones that you'll hear of, you've got LastPass. You'll hear of one password, and then Keeper. Keeper Security is the one that I'm currently using. There are more than those three. I am not endorsing those three. I'm not affiliated with any of them. I personally use Keeper, and that's just because my friend told me to, and she knows more about cybersecurity than I do. So I moved from LastPass over to Keeper, but do your own research on figuring out which is the best one for you. Um, uh, I'm interested if people are already using a password manager, and if you are, if you just write the name of it in the chat. But if you are not using one already, I highly recommend that you look into this. Majority of them you can all start for free, and then you have to start paying for more and different devices. But I don't find it overly crazy expensive for that extra security to have on my passwords. And I have it on both my desktop and my mobile. Two-factor authentication. So most of you have probably heard of 2FA. Now a lot of banks, emails, social media platforms, crypto exchanges, they kind of make it mandatory to have these 2FAs. They are now kind of more of an industry standard, and the new trend in kind of industry is the passkeys. And I actually haven't incorporated those into this webinar, which I should. But there are a few different methods of 2FA, which I think is important. Because if your 2FA is SMS and it's your mobile, and you lose access to your mobile, or you do get SIM swapped, and that hacker has access to your SMSs, they could potentially change access to important accounts, right? So sometimes, that SMS is not necessarily the best if they manage to SIM swap you. The phone app, if you lose your phone, or in terms of the logging in, like, so you don't actually have the 2FA app in because you've lost your phone, but you're trying to log into an account. But the people that maybe have your phone, or if you found it, or if it's damaged, they don't necessarily know what accounts to be able to log into and have your passwords to be able to do the 2FA. So they can't get in just because they have the 2FAs. But if they have access to your phone and your SMS, then they could potentially gain access to accounts. And then the third is a hardware device. I personally haven't used the hardware device myself yet, but there are some examples that we'll go through in just a moment. SMS or email, this is where I'm sure you most get these all the time when you sign up to an account. You'll either get a text message or they'll send a code to your email, and you've got to enter in that one-time password code to get into that account. So very often it will be sent via email. Some platforms will give you a choice of both. Some will make you, enter in a code through an email or an SMS. Some of them will make you enter in like a phone authenticator. So this is a screenshot of the Microsoft one that maybe many of you have used before. Google and Microsoft are probably the two most popular ones, but then applications like Keeper, which is the password manager, also have a 2FA application, which my friend has told me is much better and safer than using Google or Microsoft. So I actually need to make the migration over and change all my 2FAs, which is a very big job that I've been putting off. So there's a few different applications that you can use. This is the hardware device. I personally have not used it. I actually have one sitting on my desk. I got it as a merch present at the Consensus event. I'm actually going to Consensus next week again. Maybe I'll get another one, but I have not used it yet. But it is on my desk and I will get there. But the same is it's just supposed to be the most securest way of 2FA. So you may only use this on really kind of important things like hardware devices or different types of devices that you need to be using that hardware device to be able to log in to access that account. So it might not be practical for everyday accounts or uses. So go and do your own research on that and what might be some of the best 2FA solutions for you. So, to kind of start to summarize it up with phishing methods, what can you do to protect yourself? You really want to be paying attention out to all those URLs. If you get anything from any bank, crypto exchange, any government, anything, don't go start clicking links. Don't, start hitting reply because a lot of the times this is the phishing emails that they're trying to get you to click on something and hopefully maybe potentially download a virus or get you to enter in information. They're phishing for more information to try to social engineer you. So just remember, whenever you're unsure, just go and contact that company or that person directly. Don't reply via that email or that SMS that you may have received. If you have heard of this platform, sorry, before, have I been spewed? You can either go into that domain or scan that QR code, but you can go in and actually put in your email address, and I'll show you on the next screen. And it will actually tell you if that email address has been compromised. And so this is an old compromise email from a long time ago, actually 2021, when Ledger had their breach. And all these phishing emails were sent as and that's a really bad URL example, but they got much more sophisticated. But when you go to this site, you'll see here on the left one of the emails, and it says, "Oh, look at all these accounts, Canva, Ledger, MyFitnessPal." So these were a whole bunch of applications that I was using that their databases got compromised, and so my data was out there. It was leaked. So any information or data that I had given to these platforms such as my name, my email, maybe my mailing address, all that sort of stuff, the bad actors, the hackers had. So you can go in there and put in your email address and kind of see to see if you're aware of these breaches because a lot of the times we are not we're not made aware of these breaches when we're supposed to. And so how can you protect yourself if you're unaware of these breaches? So this is one way that you can try to stay out there and protect yourself. Social engineering, so they are going to try to get as much information that they can online. So if you can reduce, don't have your birth date and your phone number and all that type of information available for everybody to see. Try not to give information out via SMSs or over the phone unless you can verify their identity. And if you always want to be, safe, the old paper shredding machine, it's a bit old school, but it's also a way to dispose of important documents of your personal information rather than putting it into the bin. Because if that information goes into the wrong hands, then it's fuel for the hackers. So make sure that you secure your email by using a strong password, using 2FA, always having a backup email, making sure that you're reviewing your security notifications, make sure that they're on, and maybe continuously checking them, and then downloading any backup codes if available. This will depend on your email provider and your platform. But go in and plug that into GBT, ask it how to secure your email accounts, ask it how to secure your social accounts, and it will walk you through step by step. Last few before we dive into this fireside chat. SIM swapping, as I said, unlikely, but has definitely been popular before and something that you should be made aware of. But if people can, and I'm not sure with these eSIMs how much easier it is to do SIM swapping. When I was in the Philippines, I was actually disappointed on how easy it was for me to swap my SIM over, even though it was me legitimately, but I kind of felt like a scammer could have easily have done that. But remove SMS 2FA where possible, like so that they're not reliant on the phone number, because if they can steal your phone number, then they basically can get all of those codes. Some platforms will allow you to add a PIN to your network provider that you have to provide, and so that you need to know that PIN. And add a note to your account if you can, if your provider allows you to only allow SIM swapping in the store. Although now there's eSIMs, which are much more popular than the physical SIMs. So you don't necessarily have to go into the store anymore. But definitely something that you want to be aware of. This is a scam that I personally have had in the past where they were trying to impersonate my mobile provider, trying to get me to give them some of like my personal information. I didn't click the link, it looked like it could be a legitimate URL. I just went to my Optus page and logged in. You can also report the link, but just never provide any information. And a lot of the times, these SMS text messages are scams. So keep yourself, updated. Make sure that you're continuously updating apps, making sure that you're using those biometrics, those passwords. Make sure you have Find My Phone enabled. Go make sure that you have all these security settings, regularly reviewing the permissions. If uninstalling old apps, wallets, we're going to talk about extensions in just a moment. Oh, yeah. I'm just mindful of time, but I think I'm coming to the end. Browser and extension hygiene. So, if you are connecting with Web3 apps and dApps, a lot of the times you might connect and you might just leave them there. If you're not using them, it's very, a good hygiene to turn the extensions off. And then only kind of toggling them on when you need to use them, because essentially you're cutting that internet connection. So here's some examples you'll see here. I had Trust toggled on. I had Phantom, MetaMask, and Polkadot toggled off. That was just to kind of give you an example. So if you're not using the applications, then just toggle it off and don't have it connected to your browser. So to summarize it up, just always use strong passwords. Keep your tools tidy, disconnect from hot wallets. Make sure that you're using storage or multi-sig, different types of hardware, not only for your 2FA, but also for storing your crypto. Especially when you're doing crypto transactions, make sure that you're verifying, testing transactions is always important to start with. Backing up your private keys, making sure that you're storing those and just staying informed and up to date, especially with current scams and things that are happening that generally will be shared, amongst the community and different, news platforms and education platforms. So just remember that not your keys, not your crypto. It's kind of one of our big taglines that we have. So keep your private keys secure. Now, a quick reminder for all of you Australians, if you're new to the call and you weren't here at the beginning, you can get $20 free. It is for Australian customers only because you do have to get KYC, and Digital Surge is for an Australian based exchange only. But what we're going to do now, I do see some questions in the chat, which you can add more because we are going to jump into questions. But before we jump into those questions, I am going to invite Johnny from Digital Surge as a guest speaker, and I'm just going to make them a co-host in case they want to share or do anything. And I just want to confirm, Johnny, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear
Oh,
you. I'm just gonna stop sharing. Oh, and I can see you. Perfect. I don't need, I'm just gonna move my Zoom screen now
mm,
over so I'm not, because I don't need my slides anymore. So I'm gonna feel like I'm looking at you. But thank you, Johnny, so much for joining us tonight to dive in a little bit deeper of the topic because we've just kind of gone through, staying safe and talked particularly about crypto scams. But it's always nice to bring somebody in that works in that vertical, with the cryptocurrency exchange. I'm sure that you guys come across and hear about all sorts of different scams and keeping yourselves up to date. So we wanted to invite you in and just pick your brain a little bit. But before we do
mm.
that, for anybody, if you have questions as we go along, pop them in the chat and we'll answer them as we go through. But before I jump in and ask some of the questions that I have that are specific to crypto security and scams and how Digital Surge approaches those, could you maybe just briefly introduce yourself so that people know like who you are, your background, and what you do at Digital Surge before we jump into the conversation?
Sure thing. Well, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Um, so I'm Johnny. I am the service and compliance lead at Digital Surge. I've been with Digital Surge for 4.5 years now. Been in the crypto space for close to 10 years now. So being in the operations kind of side of Digital Surge and in Exchange, we kind of see everything that you've kind of touched on throughout tonight. So you
Mm.
guys are in good hands.
Yeah, I'm sure. And that's why I wanted to dive in and kind of get an opportunity to um, ask some questions. So my first question is, what does Digital Surge do behind the scenes to detect and kind of prevent scam activity on your platform?
Mm. Good question, Danielle. So, user protection isn't optional for us. It's essentially the foundation of everything we do, and we genuinely take pride in it. Like our priority is to keep users safe, maintain a safe platform, so when users are navigating the space, trading, they can trust us. Especially in a space where it's still emerging, new users are jumping in every day. it's really important that we are doing our best to educate and provide a safe place for them to trade. And in terms of, I guess, detecting and preventing kind of scams on our platform, we have a lot of monitoring systems that looks for unusual patterns, behaviors, and there's always a human layer behind it, and I'm one of those layers, real people reviewing accounts, making contact, and just reaching out when something doesn't look or feel right, when a customer's just navigating and entering the space. Because when someone new joins the space, that is when they are most vulnerable, and we're there to make sure that they're protected in any way we can. So we're always constantly keeping up to date with kind of scam tactics, trends. So we're informed about them so we can act on them. And we're always improving our systems to an interface to just make it easier to help users from harming themselves in this space when all they're trying to do is get on board, join the crypto world.
Mm-hmm. Is one of the one of as I've seen the industry
Mm,
progress, one of the things I've seen exchanges do, and I believe Digital Search does this as well, to prevent scam activity from when you're transferring funds for the first time. So it's the same as like when you're doing that pay ID for the first time, they hold
mm,
it for 24 hours, but then
mm,
after that, it's always instant because they want to do their DD, make sure that the account is right. And then after that, they're gonna, do the transaction as pay ID is super fast.
mm,
Not that it's the same, as that, but the kind of same concept that you sometimes have to add the wallet and then like verify the wallet and you have to kind of go through the that you're and then saying what the wallet's for. So it's like, oh, I'm adding this wallet because I'm transferring it to myself, or I'm doing this or whatever to try to, in case that person is adding a wallet to send money to like a scammer, so that it's trying to kind of
mm.
deter that. Um, do you implement that in your platform, or is that something that?
Yeah. So each financial institution, exchange will have their own security kind of layers and processes. And specifically at Digital Surge, we have many, many different layers to ensure that when a user is transacting, they're doing it safely. So there's a few levels to it. So firstly, for Australian dollar withdrawals, we have a default 24-hour delay. So this only includes first-time withdrawals. After that, it's instant, no friction. And when it comes to crypto withdrawals, the user has to verify a lot of details to be able to send crypto out of their account because we want to make sure that the account holder is actually making the transaction itself. So you need access to your 2FA device, which is your mobile phone, access to your email, and then you've got to verify the wallet address you're intending on sending it to. There's a new rule in Australia where now we need to collect information around who the intended recipient is. So where are you sending it to? What country are they from? But then there's another layer where we kind of step above and beyond. And this is where we find where we really care about users. So when a new user comes on, we sometimes just give them a quick call and say, hey, what's happening? Like, do you have experience where you're intending and sending it to? And that's where we find the most value in terms of protecting users. It does take up a lot of more of our time, but just jumping on the phone for a quick minute chat, and speaking to someone can really prevent harm because yes, you can see a lot of things. You're ticking off a lot of boxes to complete a withdrawal, but sometimes you just need real human contact to kind of help you walk through what you're doing, right? Because sometimes these people have found someone online that's trying to help them and they're saying, hey, do this, do this, do this, do this. Yes, they're doing all those things, but where is the funds actually going to? Oh, I'm going to send it to some coin or some website I found online, someone I met on Facebook. So just having a quick minute conversation can really prevent someone from harming themselves financially. So that's another layer that we have on top of just all these additional technical layers too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what are some of the like specific scams that you
Mm,
are seeing most frequent or more frequently right now, right? Because
mm,
scams did definitely tend to change and trend? And then this is also
Mm.
kind of Andre's question, what common types of scams do you see? So pretty much the same question. So what would be a common trend or one that you're seeing at the moment?
Yeah, that's a great question, Danielle. Scams have evolved tremendously over the last few years. They used to be much more easier to detect, so much easier to kind of understand what's behind it. Like as you're aware, BitConnect is just this Ponzi scheme, right? You don't see as many of them anymore because people have learned what they look like and what they seem like, right? So
Mhm.
now scammers becoming a bit more sophisticated. So there isn't one specific kind of scam. So everything you touched on, like investment scams, romance, impersonation, phishing, social engineering, what's changed is how sophisticated they have become. They're not running one scam in isolation anymore. They're layering their attacks, combining a lot of different types of tactics, merging into one so that it's really hard for a new user to come into the space and be like, oh, that's obviously a scam. Right. So I don't know what the name it is, but it's just a much more sophisticated way of attacking. They build a profile, a picture, layer it in, and then by the time you know it, users have been, I guess,
Mhm.
harmed financially. So that's like the other part of this now is recovery scams, which is once you've been a victim, you've been targeted, a scammer has successfully taken a few dollars or a few thousand or much more, they will retarget you because they know that you have money, firstly, and they know all your details. So then they'll socially engineer something like, hey, Danielle, I know you've lost some money a month ago. We are a recovery agency from XXY. We're here to help you. Can you provide us some details to help? Okay, cool. Now just pay some legal fees or tax, and we'll return all the money that you've lost before. And then you send them that money, and then they say, actually, we need a bit more money. So then it's just another method of attacking once they've already inflicted damage. So they're becoming very sophisticated, very sophisticated.
Yeah, definitely, especially with AI now and the deep fakes and being able to,
Mm,
impersonate your voice or something just from having some video of you. So it is a bit scary how sophisticated that they're getting. And how, like you said, they're just kind of continuously collecting data and trying. And I think it's also like a sheer volume. It's like just how many times can we email or and just like all you need to do is slip up once maybe and click
mm,
something and you've got a virus on your computer or like I did it, this while back. It's a Telegram compromised account, and then like I was just doing a million and one things, and I wasn't paying attention, But luckily, I did catch it. I caught it in time. Like my computer, I still had to do a factory reset on my computer, and I had to. The scammers did have access to my computer for a short period of time. But it is scary on how sophisticated that they're getting and it's changing, right? And so like
mm,
in the community, say like in the Telegram community, or if for a while it was they were using Teams, and then it was like everyone's like, be careful, don't use Teams meetings links, and then they switched it to then using Google Meets, and then they like
mm,
they're constantly pivoting their tactic or their strategy. So like even
mm,
though we're all trying to help each other or support each other, or like if if someone's account has been compromised or people are impersonating them, we can try to do the best that we can, but these scammers are definitely quite sophisticated.
yeah.
So,
But yeah, I'll just add on to that as well, Danielle. I don't know if you heard, but a few weeks ago, there was a fake ledger app in the App Store that was published, and they successfully drained close to $10 million within just 1 week. So this fake app itself didn't target just new users, it targeted experienced users too. So users that who were already had a ledger set up and they just wanted to install the app on their phone so they have remote access to it. They installed it. Unfortunately, they punched in their seed phrase and wallets were drained. So it's really unfortunate. 10 million in just a week, which is crazy. So
I
it's
did
not just
not hear
simple.
of that.
Yeah.
That was the most recent one. But that
Mm.
who would be at fault there? The App Store?
So yeah, so Apple has high standards for publishing apps, but the scammers are getting really, really good at publishing apps under, I guess, organizations and companies. So that's the question that's on debate. Who's at fault there, right? Like, was it the user because they put in their seed phrase onto a fake app, or was it because Apple published a fake app, right? So there's a bit of discussion
Well,
happening with that there.
yeah, I guess not that we're here to go down that rabbit hole, but I would say that Apple has some liability there and probably should have some sort of insurance for
Yeah.
things that if they
Mm, mm,
exist, like a scammer got through their systems, but that shouldn't like impact the people that trust the App Store.
mm.
Like why would you think that there's a fake app in there that's gonna drain my liquidity? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, drain my crypto when I put in my seed phrases. So wow, I did not hear about that, but
Yeah.
it just keeps having problem after problem. I should probably get my crypto out of my ledger. Uh, um, we've talked already about the approach that you have with security with
Mm,
when people are doing withdrawals, with those delays in the beginning and having those verification to kind of protect those people when they're doing those withdrawals to make sure that their account hasn't been compromised. It is them. They know the person that they're sending it to. But do you come across often when a scammer has managed to convince somebody to send crypto to a wallet? It's a romance scam or a fake investment
mm,
or something. Um, is there anything that the exchange can really do, or can you share kind of like, is this a common, thing where people come to you and they're like, oh, I sent
mm.
person like this money to this wallet. Can you help me get it back? But then you're kind of like, once you've sent it, it's too late. Like, can you give us a little bit of background on how common it is and
Mm.
what they can do if they are a victim that sends money to a wallet through a centralized exchange?
Yeah, that's a good question. And anyone that works on the front line in crypto will understand how much, I guess, scams and fraud kind of attacks kind of uses through this kind of layer. Um, so I don't know the specific stats, but if you look at ScamWatch's scam stats annually, hundreds of millions of dollars get scammed through different types of schemes and through crypto. Scammers and fraudsters love to accept crypto because they know that crypto cannot be reversed, right? Keyword reverse. So the honest answer is that when a user has sent money to a scammer or somewhere, um, it's non-reversible. So once it's gone, recovery is extremely difficult because now who has the crypto? They have the crypto. And if they have the crypto, only they can send it back. So it's extremely difficult. Not saying it's impossible, but it's extremely difficult. And once it's leaved the exchange, we essentially can't do anything about the recovery, as I mentioned, because it's non reversible. But what we can do is to prevent any further damage and harm. So, as I mentioned earlier, recovery schemes and scams are usually the next layer of attack once the user has been scammed. So, once they're aware, okay, I understand I've been scammed. But then, a week later, a recovery agency will contact them. So that's where we can play a role and educate them and inform of them what's likely to happen soon because of their data leakage and the scammers looking to try to take and drain more money, they will be targeted again because they know
Mhm.
once they take money from you, they can try and take it more from you. So what we do offer is just support itself to prevent harm, but also reporting it to the right agencies around identity theft, scam watch, so that other people can be supported too. So if there's a particular website, a particular investment scheme, reporting it to ScamWatch, they can inform ASIC, and then they have an alert list on ASIC as well to help other investors see if they're a potential red flag. So if you find like an investment scheme or scam that seems really risky, you can actually check on ASIC as well if they've flagged it because of other victims reporting it. So
Mm, that's a good
yeah,
hot
so
tip.
preventing further harm is usually the only option once crypto has been sent and the scammers stolen the money. That's the honest truth.
Yeah. And does it because and this might be a bit more too complex of a
Mm,
question. But I'm gonna ask it anyways. So there's, our centralized exchanges and our decentralized exchange wallets, that we have. So if we transfer money from, say, my Digital Surge account to another centralized account,
mm,
if the scammer is using a centralized account, then wouldn't like internally, wouldn't one exchange be able to say, hey, this wallet has been flagged to have been suspicious activity, and then they should be able to see if they can identify that person?
mm.
Or is it that most of the time all these scammers are using like a Web3 native wallet, so then there is no way of tracking them?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and definitely more on the complex side. So, but I can certainly answer that. So, a lot of scammers will generally withdraw it, depending how sophisticated and how smart they are. They'll withdraw it to a private wallet, so one that doesn't uh, hold any KYC. But from time to time, scammers would also send it to another centralized exchange, and that's another technique called layering. So when they send it to the other exchange, they don't keep it on that exchange. They'll send it away again so that when law enforcement or forensics try to track the transactions, um, it's heading into kind of like making it a lot harder to track and trace, right? And a lot of the times when they send it to another centralized exchange, it is some sort of other victim or a account that has been used with the intention of just layering funds. So a stolen ID. So even though it's tied to someone, that person might not even be aware. So there's a lot of sophisticated kind of tactics. They just make it really hard to track and trace. But generally speaking, they're getting much more sophisticated. They're getting much more smarter with how they do things. So they'll leave you breadcrumbs to chase. But as you chase those breadcrumbs, the crypto is generally long, long gone. And they could end up in a mixer or a coin join where then it becomes essentially impossible to trace. So they do keep law enforcement really busy.
So that's why it's although sometimes it's annoying when you want to like transfer some of your crypto and it's like, hey, go and check your email and confirm and put in your 2FA and like, when you're going through the process, sometimes you're like, ah, this is so clunky, right? But at the same time, I appreciate those extra layers because it is really once you've sent those funds, you're like, okay,
Mm,
we've double checked with you. You've clicked yes on the email. Now you're going to enter in your 2FA. And then that means that you're 100%, agreeing that you're happy to send these funds. And we've done our best or our due diligence to get you to double check that and trust where these funds are going because it's not like the banks, it's not like my American Express where I call them up and say, I would like to, dispute these charges. And then they go and dispute
mm,
and then like refund me the money. Like you can't do that, right? So you guys have to implement these preventative measures before to try to prevent that because once the money is gone, it's too hard to recover.
mm.
So we do have a question here. What are some of the practices Digital Surge employees to prevent from scams to themselves and loss of exchange funds? So I think they're asking like what you do as a team to prevent yourselves. You know, obviously, if you're working in an exchange, I guess
Mm.
if you're considered maybe a higher target.
Yep. Yeah, so that's a really good question. That comes around more the operations kind of side for a centralized exchange. So at Digital Surge, we have many layers of security. So that operates on an individual and account level, but also as an exchange level. So we hold a majority of assets in cold wallets, meaning that they're not connected to the internet and they have multi-sig requirements. So multiple signatures need to sign them off to complete certain transactions. And assets for customers, we hold one-to-one and are separated from our operating fund. So what you see on your digital surge account means that's the assets we are holding. And there are layers of encryption that prevent any single kind of point of failure to prevent, I guess, any sort of loss at an exchange level. So that is more of a high level question. So thank you for that. Glad I could explain that.
Perfect. Well, we will start to wrap it up. So, any last minute questions, now is your time to pop them in there. To wrap it up, you know, to the new people that are new, or maybe not even new people, but just to tie, maybe I'm going to tie both of these questions that I have into one. But kind of, what's one kind of number one kind of red flag, you know, that you would maybe kind of highlight or say watch out for? And that kind of ties into like what kind of like piece of advice that you would say somebody that's kind of maybe new to the crypto space. What's a piece of like advice or a red flag that you would, you know, share with those people as they navigate this space?
Yeah, great question. So, why do people jump into crypto in the first place, right? That's all we got to ask. And most of the time, people jump into crypto is because they want to generate some sort of gain or wealth, right? So the number one red flag for these people joining crypto is that if something sounds really easy to make money, if all you have to do is send funds, claim some kind of offer or bonus, or buy a specific coin, or send your money to somewhere so they can trade or invest it, you're certainly almost looking at some form of scam. So that's the biggest red flag if something looks and sounds really easy to make money. So everyone wants a shortcut, but if I had to give a piece of advice, there is no shortcut to build wealth, make money. So you'll see it on, TikTok, Instagram all the time. But the reality is to build, wealth, it takes a bit of time and it takes a bit of knowledge. And joining, I guess, education webinars like this really help you build that foundational knowledge. And I truly believe that before anyone makes a trade or investment, they should have some foundational knowledge on everything we kind of touched on in this webinar. Because if you don't know how to keep your money and protect your assets, then what's the point if you make a lot, right? You could lose it all the next day too. So
Hmm.
that's one of the biggest red flags, and that's kind of my advice. Just be aware of these scams, and if it sounds easy, it's likely not. So please be careful. Always verify.
Yeah, if it's usually if it's too good to be true, it usually is. So stay away from those ones. But I think that's definitely great advice. We do have one last question that has come through that we'll take before we wrap it up. As institutional clients, how would their security measures be different from individual measures? I think they're asking, is there different security protocols in place for institutional clients versus individual?
So yeah, that's a good question. Not something I can particularly answer. So at Digital Surge, we allow individual accounts, corporate accounts, SMSF accounts, trust accounts. And if you're talking larger institutions, then that would be a little different. But I'll just answer it based on what we have at Digital Surge. So we treat every account the same. We protect every account as much as we can. So whether you're a big fish or a small fish, we protect you with as much, force as we can. And we want to make sure your account stays safe, secure, and the transactions you're making is you actually making the transactions. So there's a lot of security layers, as I mentioned earlier, around operating the exchange. Every single user and account on our platform have those access to those, I guess, security benefits.
Mm. Yeah, perfect. You would think that, yeah, that security level protocol would be there in place. The only thing that maybe with institutional clients is there might be different like multi-sig wallets and things that would be set up if there was multiple people in charge of those accounts. But otherwise, I would assume that the security side of things would be the same. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing that knowledge with us, Johnny. I hope that everybody enjoyed tonight's webinar and learned something new. As always, we will share the recording in the Education Hub. So always share and recommend to your friends who want to learn more about crypto because knowing how to stay safe online, how to prevent scams, how to protect your crypto, how to store it safely, these are all the number 101s. So it's really important that they educate themselves. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks again, once again, Johnny and Digital Surge for helping us with this educational and supporting this educational program. And everybody enjoy the rest of your evening, day, night, wherever you are in the world.
Thanks, everyone. Had a great conversation.
Thank you.
Nighty.
Bye.